The most corrupted bloodlines in all of Appalachia. How inbreeding, created incurable diseases. A tale of isolation, of genetic deterioration, and the devastating consequences that emerge when family trees fail to branch. Our investigation takes us back to the winter of 1957, deep in the mist-shrouded hollows of eastern Kentucky, where the ancient Appalachians fold into themselves like the pages of some forbidden book. It is in these isolated American pockets that time and progress seem to have forgotten. Here, a local physician named Dr. Thomas Harrington first documented what would become known as Shelton syndrome. In Ellesley County, Kentucky, one of the nation's most impoverished regions during the mid-20th century, our story begins. With coal mines shutting down and economic opportunities disappearing, many families retreated further into the mountains, forming communities cut off from the outside world by both choice and geography. By 1957, the Shelton family had inhabited the same valley for 7 generations. Their ancestral property, nearly 200 acres of rugged woodland, was nestled between 2 steep ridge lines that effectively isolated them from neighbors, especially during harsh winters when the single dirt road could be blocked by snow for weeks. Dr. Harrington wrote in his medical journal, "I knew something was profoundly wrong the first time I visited the Shelton homestead. Around a central clearing, 3 generations lived in connected cabins, and the physical similarities were striking, not merely family resemblance, but distinctive abnormalities appearing with alarming frequency. The family patriarch, Elijah Shelton, then 79, had married his first cousin Sarah back in 1895. Their children had predominantly married within the family or with members of 2 other nearby families, the Rosses and the Bennetts, with whom they had intermarried for generations. By the 1950s, the family tree had become so intertwined that most children in the youngest generation were simultaneously cousins, second cousins, and sometimes even aunts or uncles to their own siblings. After a traveling Bible salesman reported children with severe deformities, local authorities called Dr. Harrington to the property. What the doctor discovered would eventually lead to one of the first modern American studies on the genetic consequences of consanguineous relationships. A constellation of symptoms was exhibited by the youngest Sheltons: distinctive facial features, including widely spaced eyes, unusually small heads, and malformed jaws, cognitive impairments ranging from mild to severe, and most notably, a progressive neurological disorder causing childhood tremors that eventually led to a loss of motor control in early adulthood. In the main cabin, Dr. Harrington noted, "I examined Miriam Shelton, aged 32, who exhibited advanced symptoms of what I now believe is a hereditary neurological condition. Her hands shook uncontrollably, her speech was slurred, and according to her family, she had been steadily deteriorating since her mid-20s. Similar symptoms, though less advanced, were shown by 2 of her brothers. But it was the children who concerned Dr. Harrington the most. Of the 19 children under 18 living on the property, 14 showed signs of developmental delays, physical abnormalities, or early symptoms of the progressive disorder. From congenital heart defects, 5 had died in infancy or early childhood, a rate far exceeding the national average. The most troubling case was that of young Empt Shelton, age 9, the doctor wrote. Despite having never left the valley in his life, he seemed to suffer from symptoms mimicking advanced radiation exposure, hair loss, skin lesions, and immune deficiencies. Yet this was clearly a genetic condition, not environmental. The isolation of the Shelton family wasn't merely geographical. As Dr. Harrington investigated further, he discovered that deep-seated distrust of outsiders, reinforced through generations of family law, had been passed down. After the Civil War, Elijah Shelton's grandfather, who had fought for the Confederacy, retreated to the mountains, believing the government would eventually come to seize their land. This paranoia had been passed down, strengthened by occasional negative interactions with authorities and outsiders, Harrington observed. Ironically, this belief has led them to engage in practices that have indeed caused profound harm to their own bloodline. What made the Shelton case particularly significant in medical literature was not just the prevalence of genetic disorders, but the emergence of what appeared to be an entirely new syndrome, one later documented in several other isolated Appalachian communities with similar consanguinity patterns. As winter deepened in 1957, Dr. Harrington made the difficult journey to the Shelton property multiple times, gradually gaining the family's trust and collecting medical data that would eventually be published in obscure journals, largely forgotten until recent genetic research brought renewed interest to these isolated communities. If you want to discover the dark, hidden histories of America's most isolated communities, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Truths about human nature and genetics that many would prefer to keep buried in the mountain hollows are revealed by these forgotten stories. Subscribe now to ensure you don't miss the next chapter in this disturbing investigation. By the spring of 1958, Dr. Harrington had compiled enough evidence to present his findings to colleagues at the University of Kentucky Medical Center. His presentation, titled Consanguinity and Novel Genetic Disorders in Isolated Appalachian Communities, was met with skepticism and discomfort. At the time, the topic of familial intermarriage was considered taboo in medical circles, and many physicians preferred to attribute the symptoms he described to poor nutrition, environmental factors, or mountain culture. But Dr. Harrington persisted, inviting Dr. Eleanor Wainwright, a geneticist from Johns Hopkins University, to visit Ellerslie County and examine the Shelton family firsthand. Having studied genetic disorders in isolated European communities, Dr. Wainwright recognized the significance of what was occurring in the Appalachian Mountains. After her visit in June 1958, Dr. Wainwright wrote, "What we're seeing here is a textbook example of genetic load magnification. When closely related individuals have children, recessive genes that might normally remain dormant have a much higher chance of expression. In a population that has practiced consanguineous marriage for multiple generations, we're witnessing the cumulative effects, essentially, a magnifying glass on the family's genetic weaknesses. Multiple recessive genes were carried by the Shelton family that, when combined from both parents, produced severe outcomes. Most alarming was the emergence of what the doctors began to call Shelton's neurological deterioration, the progressive tremor and motor control loss that seemed to affect roughly 60% of family members by adulthood. Dr. Wainwright's examination of family records revealed patterns consistent with autosomal recessive inheritance, a genetic condition that only manifests when a child inherits the affected gene from both parents. In normal populations, such recessive conditions are rare because individuals typically must match with an unrelated carrier. But in the Shelton family, where most adults shared significant portions of their genetic code, the odds increased dramatically with each generation. Dr. Wainwright noted, "I reviewed the family Bible, which contained birth and death records going back to 1815. The pattern becomes clear around 1880 when the family became increasingly isolated. Infant mortality rates doubled, and references to the shaking sickness begin to appear by 1910. By the 1950s, it had become endemic. Economic factors also played a significant role in the community's isolation. When coal mining declined in eastern Kentucky after World War II, many of the region's young people migrated to industrial centers like Detroit and Cincinnati. But families like the Sheltons, with limited education and visible physical differences that might mark them as outsiders, remained in their mountain homesteads, further concentrating the affected gene pool. Tragedy struck in July 1958 when Miriam Shelton died after choking during a severe tremor episode. Her death spurred Dr. Harrington to take more decisive action. With the reluctant permission of Elijah Shelton, he arranged for two of the younger children, cousins Timothy and Ruth, ages 7 and 8, to receive treatment and evaluation at the University of Kentucky Medical Center. A stir was caused among medical staff by the children's appearance in Lexington. Beyond their distinctive facial features, both exhibited developmental delays and early signs of the tremor condition. Blood samples were taken for the limited genetic testing available at the time, and brain studies were conducted using the emerging technology of electroencephalography, EEG. Results were unlike anything I've seen before, reported Dr. Franklin Pierce, the neurologist who examined the children. The pattern of electrical activity suggests a fundamental difference in how signals are transmitted through the central nervous system. This isn't simply a case of developmental delay, it appears to be a unique neurological condition. For 3 weeks, the children stayed at the medical center before returning to their family compound. During that time, they became something of a curiosity, with medical students and doctors from other departments coming to observe them. While scientifically valuable, this attention raised ethical concerns that would later be addressed in changes to human research protocols. Back in the mountain hollow, tensions were rising. Some family members viewed the medical interest as intrusive, while others began to question the traditional practice of marrying within the extended family. Elijah's grandson, Joseph Shelton, 22, who had recently returned from a brief stint in the military, he had been discharged after his tremors became noticeable, was particularly vocal about the need for change. Grandpa Elijah always told us that outsiders carried disease and weakness, Joseph was quoted as saying to Dr. Harrington. But I've seen the world a bit now. I think maybe we got it backward. Maybe the sickness is coming from inside, not outside. A rift was created within the family by this growing awareness. The older generation, led by Elijah and his children, maintained that their bloodline must remain pure to protect their land and heritage. The younger adults, seeing the suffering of their children and siblings, were beginning to question these long-held beliefs. By the fall of 1958, Dr. Wainwright had prepared a comprehensive report on the Shelton family's condition. Her recommendations were straightforward but culturally challenging. The pattern of intermarriage must end to prevent further concentration of genetic disorders. She wrote, based on my analysis, continued consanguineous marriages within this population will result in increasing severity of symptoms and likely introduction of new genetic disorders. The condition I've termed Shelton's neurological deterioration appears to be progressive and ultimately terminal, with no effective treatments currently available. What neither doctor could have anticipated was how their scientific interests would collide with deeply held cultural beliefs, governmental authority, and the complex ethics of intervention in private family matters, a collision that would bring national attention to the hidden hollows of Appalachia in the years to come. The winter of 1958–59 was particularly harsh in eastern Kentucky. Heavy snowfall isolated the Shelton compound for weeks at a time, preventing Dr. Harrington from making his regular visits. During this period of isolation, events took a dramatic turn that would forever alter the family's trajectory. Joseph Shelton, the young man who had begun questioning family traditions after his military service, made a decision that would be seen as betrayal by some and salvation by others. In January 1959, during a brief thaw that made roads passable, he transported his two young cousin siblings, Martha and John Shelton, ages 6 and 4, to the county seat of Boonville. Both children exhibited severe symptoms of developmental delays and early signs of the tremor condition. Joseph took them directly to the county courthouse, where he made a formal request for state intervention, claiming the children were being denied necessary medical care due to the family